everyone, and welcome to this month's Music Bar None. I am delighted that my dear colleagues from ALTA, BELLEZZA, Hanna, Geisel and Nathaniel Wood are here again, and we're going to be recording a CD at the beginning of next month. So today we're giving you like a little potpourri sneak peek of some of the pieces that we'll be recording. So if you like it in about 2 years, you can actually listen to it at a CD at home. The CD will be an exploration of music captured in a very special manuscript written by a very special person who, if you're watching this video, you'll know the name of already because it's the title of the video. It is, of course, Zorzi Trombetta. You will not believe that the amount of few people in this room can create so much noise. It's really... So, if you watched a video a couple of months ago, we actually already talked a little bit about Zorzi Trombetta, and we played a couple of pieces. If I remember, I will put a link in the description box, but I will probably forget, so feel free to just go and hunt around the playlist of Music Bar None. But anyway, Zorzi Trombetta, he was an interesting person. He was born in a small coastal town in the Peloponnese, which is, of course, in Greece. And at that time, it was a Venetian colony. And as both Venice and Greece had such strong sailing traditions, it's of course natural that he ended up having a side hustle of working on the ships. He worked as a ship's trumpeter, which was a very important job back then because it signaled when all the important things of the day was happening, like when they were going to eat, when they disembarked, when they re-embarked the ship. It was also a way of like connecting to the other ships sailing past from the same fleet. A bit like, so you love it, the tram drivers, when they pass each other, they just, they do this. It's kind of the same thing. But of course, that wasn't the only thing that he did. He also combined forces with other musicians and provided all sorts of entertainment, music while people were eating, dances, for the crew and the passengers on the ships, and also continuing the side hustle idea. When they docked, quite often they would be like nabbed and they would go off and play for a wedding or some other event as a little extra way to earn some money. They even provided some religious music in times of need, but we'll talk about that later. Now, it's kind of important to note that at this time, there was a huge trade in ships going up and down the Dalmatian and the Greek coastline, taking pilgrims to and from Jerusalem. And I have a theory, it's not maybe 100% a religious experience for these people. I kind of see it as the middle-aged version of, like, nowadays the pensioners go off on their cruises around the world. It's sort of the same sort of idea, and I will find out if I'm right or wrong, because next week I'm meeting up with my friend Tin, who's actually researching all this type of thing, pilgrim ships, and we're going to be standing behind the bar, chatting about that. I'm going to video it, and hopefully I'll be able to insert that inside the middle of this video if things have gone right, rather. And if they've gone wrong, well, never mind. So, all this naval adventures took up the first part of Zorzi's life. And we know this because he actually sat writing a logbook where he wrote down all sorts of different and interesting things about his life and what was going on at the time. And this was actually really normal. It was what anyone who wanted to go up the career ladder and wanted to sort of show what they were doing and have a portfolio, basically, of what was going on, they would keep such a journal. And in his journal, you have all sorts of stuff about building ships, astronomy, mathematical problems, also prayers, financial transactions, moral stories. And luckily for us, at the beginning, there are 10 pieces of music, like really concrete pieces of music, which is like wonderful for us as an alto cappella to have such a clear snapshot of the music that was being played and the context that it was being played in, which is, it's like precious rare gold for us to discover something like this. And I find it really interesting because it's clear, because of course at the time, wind musicians, most of the time they learn things by memory, which is why we try to play as much as possible from memory. But you can tell there's 3 different hands who've written down this music. Some of the music is like really quite well notated, very clear, very like the typical notation of the time. And you can tell he's sort of gone to someone and said, like, can you write down such and such and such a piece? And then there's also moments where there's just like rows and rows of circles on different lines, which like we can work out that it means lots of semi-brevises. And so literally it's like semi-breve, 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 semi-breve in a row. And that was his way of notating the tunes that he was playing. And so he hadn't learnt the actual official notation of the time, and that was his version of noting down what he knew. And I think that's really a fascinating insight. And I think the viewers, every so often you'll be able to see that difference. You'll be able to see the same piece in a kind of a clearly, properly, officially notated version of the piece, and then also these kind of like lots and lots of circles in a row version. So fascinating. Whoa. So then, unfortunately, the trail goes completely cold for about 30 years. We don't know anything that happened in like the middle part of his life. But towards the end, he ended up in Venice, where he and his sons were part of this famous Pifferi del Doge, which was kind of one of the leading wind bands at the time, and it went on to have a huge, great success. And I think Nate will talk about that a little bit later. That's it. That was Zorzi Trombetta's life in a nutshell. So now I think we should play some of the music that's in this manuscript. So I'm happy to invite Nate and Hanna. So I alluded to this like religious times of need, and our first block, we're going to do 3 pieces in a row by Dufay and Johannes de Limburgia, all with a Marian theme. There's an Ave Maristella, obviously Mary, Queen of the seas, because sailors were very superstitious. They needed like all the help they could get. So there's really this concept of praying to Mary, Ave Maristella. The second piece is O Maria Maristella, so you see a theme going on. And the last piece is Ave Regina. And Hanna is going to tell a little story about why we've chosen these to start the performance today.
Yes, so this first block is a reminiscence of an anecdote of the life on the ships. So in 1480, a ship on a pilgrim journey got into a storm at night, and the ship nearly sank, but it didn't sink in the end. So when the pilgrims saw a church devoted to the Virgin Mary on the shore next morning, they started singing an Ave Maristella together with the ship trumpeters to thank the Star of the Sea for their salvation.
So here we go. Ave Maristella. And I think you really notice how this would just be perfect for being on a ship at the sea. I really see like the sound going off across the ocean, and doesn't matter what storm was happening outside, you could be entertained by that. You can really like, it's loud. It's loud. In fact, we should offer earplugs at our concerts. I think. Sorry, Kendra. So, yes, moving on. Yeah, this is a really nice little detective story for this next block. One of the pieces that survives in this manuscript is just this bunch of circles going up and down on the stave. And there's written, souvent mes pas, tenor. And tenor is like the line I play, and it's kind of the basis of the piece. It's from tenere, to hold, in Latin. And so we thought, oh, that's nice. We can take this tenor and we can do something that we know that they did at the time, which was use a tenor as a basis to create a dance piece. So we've created a bass dance where, like, Hanna would write a lovely cantus line to go with my tenor line, and then Nate would put in a contratenor line to fill in the gaps, and like we would collectively create a bass dance based on this tenor, which was in the manuscript. And we already thought, like, oh, we're so cool for doing stuff like this. It's already quite special. But then, just like over the course of the time, we've actually discovered that this piece is in many, many different sources in many different ways. For instance, because of the Faenza project I'm doing with Fiona here in Music Barnan, we realized that one of the pieces in the Faenza Codex is actually also the same piece. The tenor line is exactly the same. There's no title. So if you were looking through the manuscript, you wouldn't necessarily kind of realize that immediately. But if you look, you see that actually the tenor line is exactly the same. And the thing about the Faenza Codex is it's actually written for a keyboard. So like my tenor line is in the left hand, and then the second voice is the right hand going really lots of fast notes. So we also have added that into this block. So Hannah's going to be the right hand playing lots of fast notes, and I'm the left hand playing my tenor line. Then the wonderful David Fallows, who's an amazing scholar of this period, he pointed out that there's also, in a very obscure manuscript in Montserrat, which is more famous for being a pilgrim place, there's also a version of this piece with like my voice, the tenor line, and a crazy voice for Nate, but the cantus line is missing. So we thought, okay, let's take the piece from this manuscript and we can put Hannah to work again. And she's created another different cantus line to go with that. And then last night I discovered there's also two monophonic versions. So so far none of this music has had text, apart from like occasionally just the title. We found in the Paris library, in the bibliothèque there's two manuscripts of monophonic songs, and they both have versions of this piece. So unfortunately, I only discovered this last night, so we haven't had a chance to like add that into the block. But so this piece, like from one tiny little thing in some obscure manuscript, has kind of mushroomed into a whole block, and that's what we're going to do now. We're going to do the Montserrat version, then the Faenza version, and then our bass dance version. And luckily, I always play the same thing, but these guys have had to learn lots of different stuff. also quite sharply.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
lower.
Yeah.
Good.
So the next two pieces are pieces that survive in all their three voices in the hand of a professional scribe in Zorzi's manuscript. They're both rondeaus, which were a standard song and poetic form of the period. The form consists basically of two musical parts and two sections of the rhyme scheme. And the text in some sections repeats, and in some sections adds new text within the same rhyme scheme. So the overall shape is a big AB, which is the refrain, and then a little a, where it's the first half of the piece with a different text in the same rhyme scheme. And then the refrain of the A, another big A, then the complete form AB with a new text, and finally a full AB of the initial refrain text. So AB, AB, AB. And these pieces we've arranged to underline that form. I think you'll see pretty clearly. So this is Je me recommande and Une fois avant que mourir.
Great. Now I'm really thirsty. So I think it's time for a cocktail. Is that right? Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, it's time
Always time for a cocktail.
pushing.
So I'm quite excited about this cocktail. So where do we begin? Last month I discovered a really, really nice cocktail called Renaissance, which was a late 19th century cocktail created in the Waldorf Astoria bar. I'm sitting in front of two Americans here and an American here, so this has... Oh, and well, you've also lived in America and in New York, so it has... This hotel has resonance for you guys, I guess, yeah. And so there was this world-famous cocktail bar, and this was before the Prohibition, so this was really like the beginning of cocktail culture, was sort of coming at the end of the 19th century. Anyway, it was a great, great, great cocktail. It had cognac and limoncello and red vermouth and peach bitters. And it was really nice. I really enjoyed it. So during the months, I've tried it out with various other friends who've come over for dinner or for drinks. And one time I was there with Alec, who some of you might know, well, some of you might know here, sitting here, because you know him from Basel, but some of you might know because he's often come and interviewed various people on this series. He and his boyfriend are like real cocktail connoisseurs, and together we have tweaked it and we've made it even better. And I've called it the Zorzini in honor of today. So it's kind of the same. It's still cognac and red vermouth, but I swapped out limoncello for an orange bitter, not a bitter, orange liqueur. We still add the very, very important peach bitters, which is really the icing on the cake. And instead of, very often here I do shaken cocktails, but this one is stirred, and it's very exciting because look what Father Christmas brought me. He brought me like a whole cocktail set. So now I've pre-mixed it here. If you want the exact ingredients and the exact recipe, they'll be in the description, so I won't bore you with exact amounts here, but I will get some ice. And hygiene is top of the most important things. So you just have to stir this for about 20 seconds so there can be lovely ASMR going on here for a while. The music of the cocktail. Actually, I must admit, I left this at home and Hannah saved me and brought this especially, so I forgot to add that. And then you just pour it with a slice of orange. And I've never used this before. Let's see how this goes. Do you do it like that, maybe? Da, da, da. Number one.
Nice color.
Yeah.
Light.
Number two. Thanks. And yes. Number three. And you guys, of course, will get to try this afterwards. I still have the ingredients. So, cheers to Zorzi Trombetta.
Zorzi Trombetta. Yes.
Great. Now, hopefully...
Oh. That's nice.
Okay, I wasn't sure which way that was going to go.
No. That's very nice.
So now, normally, we would sit here and we'd have a chat. But we were here very recently, like about two music by nuns ago, and I think you know enough about us. So hopefully what will happen is now, all of you watching outside will be linked magically to another interview that I'm doing with Tin, and then we'll go back to the concert afterwards. But for now, I think we could stop the film. I can make cocktails for everyone, and we can have a little break. Let's cheers.
Let's cheers.
Let's cheers. It's so cool that you're doing this. Thank you very much.
Very much. Oh, yum.
Oh,
Oh, yum. Oh, that is very good. I love this very much.
Hi everyone, so welcome back to the second half of this concert. While you've been listening to me chat with Tin, hopefully, we have been hanging out here around the bar, drinking the cocktail, discussing the sauce, and we're going to carry on with our concert, and we've got 3 more pieces. The first of which is called Jour Jour Ma Vie, which, if you're a Music Bar None avid follower, you've heard it now really many times in different formats, in different combinations. We are doing a kind of a mashup. It's a rondo form, so there's back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, and each time we go back and forth, we're going to take from a different source. So if you know, you know, and if you don't, then just enjoy the fact that it's a very cool piece. Oh, everything is better with a cocktail. Actually, in my head, I call that the chicken song because in the beginning of the B section, this is da 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 da. I always think we just sound like chicken. So, from the sublime to the ridiculous is more the other way around. From the ridiculous to the sublime, we are performing a super beautiful piece by Dufay next. C'est bien raison. It's a ballade, so you have like A, A, B. No, it's not. I can't really remember. I don't care anymore. It's a beautiful song. Enjoy. Solid. Hey, nice. So we've come to the end, almost the end of our concert. We have one more piece. And Nady's going to do a little backstory on the instrument that he has been playing and the instrument he's about to play, and fill in some of the mystery about what the Zorzi Trombetta was actually playing.
Yeah. So the Zorzi manuscript is really fascinating because, among other things, it contains some of his attempts at writing contratenor voices, which were the voices that were normally played in the alta cappella by the slide trumpet. We know it must have been a slide trumpet because these parts are in the low register and they're diatonic. And a natural trumpet doesn't have the notes between the notes of the harmonic series. So this source actually becomes a really strong argument for a slide trumpet in the mid-15th century. Later in the 15th century, as composition techniques advanced, and changed, and you started having contratenor bassos, or essentially bass voices in 3- and 4-part compositions. The third instrument in the alta capella needed to extend downwards, and someone around 1460 had the bright idea to double the slide on the slide trumpet.
Actually, can I go back, because it's based a little bit on the conversation that some of us were having just now. Can you just show that instrument again?
Certainly.
So, like, you see how actually the instrument is like doubled up, but that's just one length. That would just be one length of metal.
Yeah.
Which originally the trumpets were kind of like these really long.
Exactly. Sort of
signaling.
meter and a half, no, 2 meter, 2.5 meter long, straight monstrosities.
Which really could only do these.
Which could only do signals, exactly.
And then somebody at some point kind of learned how to bend metal. I guess.
Exactly. They developed the technology to bend tubes, which is quite tricky. You have to cast them full of lead so that they don't collapse like a drinking straw when you bend them. And so that was quite a technology to develop. And then also the technology to make tubes that are straight enough that you can make easily sliding telescopic tubes. That's quite difficult.
And that means that then you can do like the harmonic series on this and this and this and this.
Exactly. So I can fill in almost all the gaps between those various harmonic series.
And what I also think is really interesting is that this slide trumpet and the pommer has roughly the same range, which really reflects our two voices, because I am tenor and contratenor, and that's really what it says. It's like we are basically in the same range, and we're just kind of doing that cycling round, providing like the underlines to the canters, and that really matches with what I can offer.
Exactly. And so as the 15th century went on and compositional techniques changed, tastes changed, you started having bass voices. The slide trumpet no longer had enough extension in the low range to play the role in the alta capella. And round about the time when you start seeing real bass voices in compositions, in the sort of time around 1460, you start seeing iconography for something that looks more like this. A trombone, big trumpet with a double slide. And that gives me initially a lower harmonic series to bass on, and a fully chromatic extension all the way down to E below bass clef. And interesting about Zorzi, Zorzi was a trumpet player. He went on to be a central figure in the Pifferi del Doge in Venice, and his son, Alvise, who was known as Alvise Trombone, continued his dynasty, continued Zorzi's family legacy in the Pifferi del Doge into the early 16th century. So, following the family to Alvise Trombone and the birth of the Renaissance trombone.
Yeah, because that's also kind of an interesting thing. Like, we as a trio, we represent like really the tail end of the Middle Ages, this 3-part writing with a cantus, tenor, and contratenor, and that's why we have these 3 instruments with a slide trumpet. And like the second half of the 15th century, this was really when it evolved into Renaissance music. You really got a 4th voice being a bass line. And then our ensemble actually evolved, because then instead of this trio, you'd have the trombone playing the bass line, you'd have 2 pommers in the middle, because now we're in a 4-part world, and then the shawm was on top.
Yeah. But usually in that repertoire, or often in that repertoire, the second shawm was optional, a si-cachet voice. So the essential voices were still the shawm, the cantus, the tenor, and the contratenor. At this point,
sort of
a low contratenor bassus bass.
So yeah. Huh.
This month's musicology lesson.
Yes. So we're going to play now, Geese, Tandenachen. It's based on a famous folk tune about Tandenach. It's like a river or something. Andernachen, yeah.
Right.
On the
I
right.
should know
Yep.
this stuff.
It's an old Dutch folk song,
And
but was transmitted all across Europe. It was tremendously popular. This setting is by Jacob Obrecht.
And it's typical, I will play like the tenor with like the folk song line, and these guys will do lots of crazy stuff around me.
I can continue fighting the never-ending battle with condensation.